Hey, hello everyone. Hope you are doing good. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and happy Republic's Day to all my Indian friends. And let's start on day 13. Today I'm late, but let's try to cover up as much as possible and we will go through some tips and tricks on how to write. So let's cover up today's session and see how much we can, do the practice for writing.
Now, let's have a discussion about something that's very, very important. When it comes to writing, there are some basic foundational elements that you have to follow. And in this lecture, we're going to talk about the foundations of a good paragraph, which are made of unity, order, coherence, and completeness. These are the foundations of creating a very good paragraph. I think a lot of times students from other countries, sometimes you guys don't understand the foundations of writing in the American way or in the British way or in the Australian way. And it's not to say that the American, British, or Australian ways are correct, but those are the standards that you're being judged against. You're being judged on an American standard or a British standard. So you have to make sure that you write your paragraphs under those sets of rules, right? So if you're from France or you're from Brazil or China, there may be different rules for paragraph writing in your language. And if I were trying to write Chinese, I would have to write according to those paragraph writing standards. So in this lecture, I'm going to try to explain to you these foundations, because many times when I see students writing essays and I look at their paragraphs, the paragraph writing is sometimes just flat out bad because the foundations are not being followed. And I've always said students that have a strong foundation, a strong base, are always going to get very, very good scores because their base is very strong. And that means everything else they're adding onto it is also going to be very well written. All right, so let's get started and move into this. You guys already know what a paragraph is, of course. It's a series of sentences that are all grouped together around one central topic. One topic, right? One central topic, not five topics. Some of you guys make a big, big mistake in your topic sentences by putting in the central topic or two or three central topics. So you put in the central topic and the details in your topic sentence. A paragraph is about one central topic. And then you have other sentences that follow directly from that central topic and that explain that central topic. All right? The four basic elements of a good paragraph are unity, order, coherence, and completeness. If you have a good paragraph that has these four elements, you are going to look very good in the eyes of a grader. All right? So, what is unity? Unity is where you start with a topic sentence. All the other sentences support that topic. They point back to that topic. Everything is unified around that topic. Very often when I'm reading writing by students and I'm reading a specific paragraph, the paragraph will start off going down the middle of the road. Like if you're driving a car and the car is going down the middle of the road, and then suddenly the student turns right and just drives completely off the road, and you just lost all unity. Right, here's an example of bad unity. Look at these sentences here. My favorite day of the week is Monday because that is when we have sport class. I love how we learn new things in history class. Right now, that may seem funny to you, but this is the kind of stuff that I see and what graders see a lot of times, and many students don't realize they're doing that. Right? This topic sentence is about it being his favorite day because of sport class. That's the central topic. That means everything must flow from that topic. You can't talk about other classes. You can't talk about history class. That's not what the central controlling idea is. Now we have this paragraph which is now corrected. It has relevance because everything is about sport classes. Everything is related to that one central theme, right? We now have very good unity here. Our next basic foundational element of a good paragraph deals with order. This basically deals with, you have different types of order. Chronology, going from most to least important, and also logic, going in the correct logical order. One recipe for really scoring low is to have unorganized, confusing paragraphs because your order is bad. Right? Order allows you to flow from one idea to the next idea, which is very, very important. One thing that I want you to do, this is a little exercise for you. If you can, you should be, if you can, and I know you can, so stop the tape now. You're watching this recording. Stop the tape now and take a look at these 12 sentences. Go grab a piece of paper and then try to put these sentences in the correct order. You'll be amazed at how many times I read paragraphs and it just has bad order. And so if you can, just stop it. And then when we go to the next slide, you can see if you were able to put these into the correct order. Okay? So I'm about to go to the next slide. So I'm assuming that you have stopped it and tried to put these in order. So can see how it came out. Now we have these sentences in the correct order, right? This is how it should flow from beginning to end, right? Understanding order and sequencing is very, very important. And again, many times that's cultural, right? I understand that. But you just have to make sure that you have to sequence and order things according to the culture that you're doing the exam for. And you're doing this for a British, English, Australian, I'll include Australia also, way of ordering. Now let's talk about coherence. Coherence is very important, and you see that very specifically mentioned in the grading rubrics. And I'm going to talk about coherence briefly here, and then I'm also going to do a separate lecture that's only about coherence. Here we're going to talk about just two primary types of coherence with transition words and also using consistent verb tenses and point of view. All right, so we know what a transition is. A transition is where you have words that are connected together or phrases that are connected together. Transitions act like signposts that really point you to the next stage of where the conversation is moving in the paragraph. Here are verb tenses used incorrectly, right? We have our first two sentences in the past, our last two sentences in the present. Please don't do that. It's very easy to make this mistake, so you have to be mindful and be aware of what you're doing. Here we have the same paragraph with everything in the past. This is how you want to be able to write to be able to build your coherence. Here we have our point of view with consistency. Our point of view is consistent. Actually, this isn't really about verb tenses. This is really about point of view consistency. In terms of the title and heading, it should be just point of view consistency. Here's the point of view. You can see in the first sentence is his, he, his, but then we switch to I and my, right? You have to keep your point of view consistent. Finally, we have completeness. For a complete paragraph, you need enough information to support the main idea. Completeness deals with your topic sentences, your supporting sentences, and your concluding sentence, right? A really good paragraph has excellent completeness. So the big concept here, strongly written paragraphs, strongly, S-T-R-O-N-G-L-Y, S-T-R-O-N-G-L-Y, strongly written paragraphs will include all four elements described. Good luck in writing your essay. And if you have any questions, please let me know, and I will be happy to help you out in any way I can. Thank you very much.
Okay, so what we're going to be talking about in these next three lectures are the three C's: cohesion, coherence, and concise. These are the big three C's that you need to know how to do well in order to score at a high mark on the writing section. Cohesive writing is something that graders really, really appreciate. Coherence is something that's expected. And writing concisely is a high-level English skill that's extremely impressive. So if you can really work on mastering these three general English skills, it's going to definitely help your exam score, okay? So let's take a look at it. So first up, we're going to talk about what is cohesive writing. And then after cohesive writing, we'll move into coherence. And after that, we'll talk about concise writing. So cohesion, when you're talking about cohesion, we're talking about the grammatical aspects of writing. It's extremely, extremely important because cohesion affects the tone of your writing, right? It deals with the connection of your ideas at the sentence and paragraph level. So when you have really, really good cohesion, that's something that brings everything together. So your ideas are linked together and you're using language that's helping you to be able to answer the question directly and clearly throughout the entire essay. So cohesion is a very important writing skill that students need to know how to do well. A text will have cohesion if it's clearly organized, right? So sometimes I can spot an essay that's going to lack cohesion when I see a bad thesis statement. When I see a bad thesis statement, or I see like a general thesis statement that doesn't have any specificity at all, I know there's about to be a cohesion problem. When I see a student that can't write topic sentences, I know there's going to be a cohesion problem, right? So cohesion is dealing with words and phrases that act like signposts. Signpost is like the stop sign, or it's like a yield sign, right? It gives you direction of where to go. Cohesive writing, as I said earlier, is the glue. It keeps it all together. It makes your essay easy to read. Easy to read. You know, when you see an essay that's easy to read, that means that it has a high level of cohesion. These are my three big tips for cohesion and coherence. I mean, very often I talk about these two together because they go hand in hand. Okay? So write a proper thesis statement, right? If you write a proper thesis statement, you increase your ability to have cohesion, writing a great outline, and making sure each section of the essay is connected. These are different cohesion devices. Okay, conjunctions, great cohesive devices. Very often students write sentences and they're missing conjunctions. When you're missing conjunctions, you're damaging your cohesion. Punctuation, proper punctuation, sentence connectives, sentence frames, right? So these are all cohesive devices. Conjunctions are great, again, because they show the links between your ideas. Punctuation is important because it helps you know where you stop and go and where do you pause. Your sentence connectives help you to be able to transition from idea to idea. And your sentence frames act like signposting. So if you want to have really good cohesion, these are the devices that you need to be able to use very well. Repetition, right? So some people say, well, it's not good to be repetitive. Sometimes repetition is great for cohesion, but you can't be overly repetitive, right? Sometimes when you're overly repetitive, especially on an English test, it shows you have a lack of ability. But here, we're being repetitive with a very specific word combination, modern art, right? So by me repeating this in the first sentence and the second sentence, I'm using repetition in a way that is cohesive. Synonyms and paraphrasing, right? Synonyms are words that have the same meaning and provide variety in your word choices, right? You see it says they're avoiding repetition because really, repetition is something that should be used very, very specifically with very, very specific language that doesn't really have synonyms. Now, here's an example below. You see in the first sentence, we have the word myths, and then in the second sentence, we use the words traditional narratives. That's an example of using synonym language. That type of synonym language builds cohesion. Pronouns, right? Effective use of pronouns is so, so important. So important because it's an English skill, everybody, right? And remember, this is an English test. So look at what I have here at the bottom. When psychological counseling devices do not work out as expected, they are often considered a failure until the right doctor is located to try again. Those that work out better the second time often lead to positive results. That is what cohesive writing looks like. That is what cohesive writing looks like, everyone. Repeated parallel structure, really, really important, right? Really, really important. When editing your writing, notice what you have repeated, what you have omitted, and what you have not expressed clearly. That is called repeated parallel structure. Repeated parallel structure is evidence of cohesion. Transitions, most of you know transitions, right? I'm not going to read this paragraph here, but most students, when they think about the word cohesion, they think about transitions, and they overly use transitions, right? Now, this example here is, I wouldn't use this many transitions. I'm just using these transitions here to give you an example of transitional language. But the big problem is that most students only think about cohesion and they only think about transitions when it comes to cohesion. And there are transitions, there's repeated parallel structure, there are pronouns, there's synonyms, and there's repetition of specific language. All of these combined together really build cohesion. It's not just about transitions. It's not just about transitions, everybody. I'm not going to read this, but this is an example of transitional language. We can look at these two paragraphs and look at how the paragraph at the bottom uses transition language and how it's easier to understand because of that transition. Okay, so take a look at that and get a good idea of how transitions are. Okay, everybody. And here we have an example of low or basic level cohesion. And I know a lot of you are going to look at this and say, well, the sentences are well written. Why is this a low score? Right? Something can be well written and written correctly, but the level of English demonstrated is a low level. Right? So this doesn't have any cohesive devices. It's just a series of short, simple sentences. It's a series of short, simple sentences. And also it has fragments, okay? Here's that same paragraph that has a good or intermediate level of cohesion. Here's that same paragraph with a high score, advanced level of cohesion. Now, I know some of you are saying, well, I want to see them all together. I can't really see them separated like this. Don't worry about that. Here it is, right? Look at example 1, example 2, and example 3. Look at the difference between a low score of cohesion, a good score of cohesion, and a high score of cohesion. When we talk about cohesion, this is what we're talking about. Okay, so thank you very much for joining me in this discussion on cohesion, and I hope that it was beneficial for you. Thanks a lot, and talk to you soon. Okay, let's have a good conversation about coherence and what exactly coherent writing is. One of the biggest issues that I see when I take a look at student essays on any exam that they take is that there is a lack of coherence. And coherent writing is something that really, really impresses graders. And I think that most students hear the word coherent, but they really don't understand what coherent writing looks like. And they don't truly understand the skills required to produce coherent writing. So in this lecture, we're just going to touch on some of those skills to kind of build your awareness of coherent writing. You can't just look at a video and think that you got it. You have to actually practice these skills and these techniques in order to get better at your coherence. But if you want to impress a grader, this is what you need to do and work on. So the basic definition of coherence, right? It deals with the connection of your ideas at the idea level, right? And the connection of your ideas at the sentence level, right? So coherence is referring to the certain aspects, certain rhetorical aspects of your paragraphs, of your sentences that deal with developing your argument, or another way of saying that, developing your thesis statement. Okay, it's dealing with the synthesizing and the integrating of your sentences together to produce an answer that actually addresses the thesis statement. Coherence is different than cohesion. Cohesion more focuses on the grammatical aspects of writing, and there will be another lecture that talks about cohesion. But cohesion and coherence go hand in hand together, and very often people are confused by what they mean. But cohesion deals with the grammatical aspects of writing that help create coherence, okay? So coherence relates to the quality of unity in a text. How unified is your text, right? So when they say on rubrics, where they say they want you to have clear progression, they're talking about unity, right? Secondly, as I've said before, the thesis statement is the most important sentence in the entire essay. It's the most important sentence in the entire essay. And so when you have good coherence, all the elements in the essay relate to the thesis statement and answer the thesis statement. And again, all points flow together in a logical, organized manner, right? It's the flow. A very well-written essay is like water, right? It's like water. It flows down the stream, right? It's effortless. It's something that just has really good flow. But when you have a situation where there's a lack of coherence, it's like it's choppy water. It's very, very difficult to read it. So some of the steps to really creating really good coherence: having a precise, fully developed thesis statement. And if you watch the earlier lectures, or actually the later lectures, not earlier lectures, if you look at the later lectures, you're going to have a specific discussion on thesis statements. Logical outline is very important for creating coherence. Clear explanation of all relationships. One of the biggest things that most students do is they just state the relationship, right? They just state the detail. They don't have really good they don't have really good ways of explaining it. And then using the elements of coherence. And again, that deals with cohesion also. Coherence is extremely important when it comes to English level assessment. It's one of the main things that graders really look at, because it gives extremely clear focus and it makes sure that everything is logically linked together. So coherent writing is extremely impressive to a grader, There are three types of coherence: coherence between words, sentences, and paragraphs. And you're expected to be able to perform at all three levels in terms of words, sentences, and paragraphs. Now, your coherence is going to be enhanced if, when I read your essay, I can very easily understand it because it's organized and it answers the question. If that's happening, then we have coherence. When there are breakdowns of that, very often I'm looking at a student's essay, I'm like, well, you're writing really good sentences, but none of this is answering the question. None of this is addressing the question. You're outside of the box, right? So when I say you're outside of the box, I'm talking about your coherence, right? So some great ways that coherence is very helpful is it helps you to see how your ideas are organized. Sometimes you have headings and subheadings, paragraph breaks, punctuation, presentational devices. There are different things to be able to help in terms of coherence. Now, some of this, I'm talking about just coherence in general, everybody. I'm not talking about coherence in terms of all of this applies to what you do on examinations. Some of these you will use on examinations, some of these you will not use on examinations. The main point I'm making here is coherence is really about the organization of your ideas and helping to see how your ideas are organized. Right? So, we're talking about how the page breaks, an overview, punctuation, drawing attention to certain sections to make meaning more clear, right? Understanding the different question types and how they should be laid out: opinion, cause, effect, advantage, disadvantage, right? Plan your writing in advance on a skeleton framework. It really, really helps the outline. I know you've heard me preach that many, many times, but it really does help. Right, so these are just some ideas about paragraphing, okay? And if you need to, go ahead and stop and read through some of these ideas on paragraphing and coherence. So one important thing you have to do is you have to be able to eliminate vagueness and fragments, okay? So for example, this sentence says, in Oregon, they have passed a law which encourages the recycling of waste materials. In the instruction manual, it explains, right? Inflation is when. These are all fragments, right? We have vague writing and fragments. And when you have these kind of fragments, it creates incoherence because I have no idea what you're talking about sometimes. right? So it should be Oregon has passed a law which. The instruction manual explains how. Inflation occurs when. So a lot of times I see this kind of writing. I really see this kind of writing. And students want really, really high scores. But if you're writing this kind of way, vague with fragments, it destroys coherence. And then you're going to have a problem with your score. Right? So on this one, I'm not going to read through this in detail, but what I want you to do is look at this paragraph, read this paragraph, and then read through the explanation at the bottom as to why it's coherent. Right? Take some time, stop the video, read the paragraph, and then read the part at the bottom and understand why it's coherent. Same thing here. Read the paragraph, read what's below the paragraph, and read why it's coherent. Right? So very often students are not getting explained to them why something's coherent. They just talk to you and tell you this is what coherence is. Right? Or they tell you be coherent. But I'm trying to show you here why this is coherent. And if you understand why this is coherent, you'll understand how to produce it yourself. All right, so thank you very much. What I want you to do is look at this paragraph, why it's coherent. Read the paragraph, right? So very often
students are not getting explained to them why something's coherent. They just talk to you and tell you this is. Hello there. In this lecture, we're going to discuss the methods to improve paragraph coherence. Many students have asked me to give them some idea of what this concept of coherence means. You see it in the writing rubrics. You've seen it all over the internet when they're telling you about good paragraphs use coherence. But many of you don't really understand how to implement coherence. So in this short lecture, I'm going to hopefully give you some examples of how you can include coherence in your writing. Now, I will also say that this advice that I'm giving you for including coherence in your writing also works well for including coherence in your speaking. So remember, for the most part, what's good for writing is also good for speaking. Okay, so let's move on and let's find out how we can get better with including coherence. This is not a writing class, but I just thought that it was so important to include coherence because many students don't know how to implement it properly. All right, so let's have a look and see exactly what we need to do. Well, when we talk about coherence, there are, when you look over the internet or you hear from different sources, most of the time they give you about 3 or 4. Actually, there are about a good 7 different ways to include coherence. And so I'm going to go over all 7 of these. We're dealing with repeating keywords, pronoun reference, parallelism, transition words, verb tense, synonyms, and also sequencing. And using all of these or just a few of these is going to greatly impress the grader when it comes to judging you on the concept of coherence. Did you use it or not? Well, our first 2 concepts deal with repeating a key phrase and also pronoun reference. Look at our paragraph here for repeating a key phrase. For Donald Trump, without power, a politician is nothing. A politician must have the power to be heard, the power to decide, and equally important, the power to shape events. According to Trump, a politician without power is an empty suit. Every politician should exude power in every move and nonverbal gesture if he wants to be powerfully respected. Now, there's good coherence here, right? Because without a question, you know this paragraph is about politicians needing power. It's clear, right? That's an example of coherence. Now, I think if you were using some synonyms for the word power, that can make it even better because it's showing also some creativity to your writing. But just as a basic tenet, repeating a key phrase is a good way to show cohesion. Now, pronoun reference. Pronoun reference is also a very good way to show cohesion. Now, in this paragraph, I am exaggerating it a little bit. I probably wouldn't use this many pronouns, but I'm just exaggerating it a little bit to give you the idea of what it means to use pronouns. Chinese people can be very soft-spoken, but don't let that give you the wrong idea of their intensity and determination. When the time comes, they can be pretty tough, and they will let you know with clarity what they mean. Chinese culture spread all over the world in prehistory, and it is because these soft-spoken people learn how to get their point across without saying it loudly, right? So there we have a really good use of pronouns to build cohesion. Now let's take a look at our next 2 concepts, parallelism and transition language. First, parallelism. With the Republican Party in 2017, with the Republican victory in 2017, the Democratic Party felt all that Obama had worked for was to be lost. Their voters had deserted them, their policies were being dismissed, and their credibility as speaking for the people had been lost. You see that sentence? That's parallelism. The more they searched for answers and the more they adjusted their viewpoint of view, the less confident the average American became in their ability to govern. That sentence also has parallelism, right? These are the kind of things that you can do that will impress the grader when it comes to evaluating your writing on the concept of coherence. Transition language. Although it is now nearly 2 years since Barack Obama left office, his legacy is still debated in American politics. While Donald Trump and the Republican Party have not been in power since 2008, many of their policies still live on despite Obama's efforts to change them. Indeed, some people see Obama as having failed in his legacy since now Trump can easily wipe out any gains Obama made with the stroke of a pen, right? So with parallelism, it's important because parallelism helps you to bind your text together. It's like glue. And remember also with transition words, you don't really want to necessarily overdo it, right? And also with transition words, don't use the same words paragraph after paragraph, sentence after sentence, variety, right? Range is very, very important. Our final 2 concepts, that we're going to talk about together like this, I guess there are a couple of more I'm going to mention actually. Synonyms. Synonyms are very, very important. It's a way of repeating key phrases, but doing it creatively. And I think that's even more highly valued. Teenagers face an enormous amount of peer pressure from friends and schoolmates. As a result, many young adults are exhibiting signs of severe stress or depression at an early age. These adolescents need professional help to overcome their problems. When this help is given, our high school age youngsters will feel less peer pressure. Okay, I have to change that sentence grammatically. That last sentence, everybody, that last sentence should read, when this help is given, it should be a comma there. And I'll have to go back and edit that. When this help is given, comma, our high school age youngsters will feel less peer pressure. Okay, that's how that final sentence should read, everybody. I'm speaking to you like we're in the classroom, but that's actually what I would do in the classroom, is just correct myself right then. So again, that final sentence is, when this help is given, comma, our high school age youngsters will feel less peer pressure. They should be crossed out, all right? But that's an example of using synonyms. Next, when it comes to sequencing information from old to new, that just means that the old or known information is placed at the beginning and the new or unknown information is placed at the end of a sentence, right? That's proper sequencing. And also in terms of sequencing, things go from general to specific. All right, in a paragraph, the general idea goes before the specific idea. That's also proper coherence and proper cohesion, which is the same thing, cohesion, coherence. Verb tenses should not be incorrectly used, as you see in this paragraph here. As you can see in the first sentence, we're using the past tense, and then in the very next sentence, we're using the present tense. You wouldn't believe how many times I see this in essays. It's amazing. It really is amazing how many times I see this in essays where people are just mixing up their tenses in one paragraph. And it's difficult. I mean, it's a challenge. You have to be aware of it. I've made that mistake before. So, I mean, none of us are perfect. But this is just something you want to be aware of in terms of if you want to get a high grade in terms of coherence. Right, this is what that paragraph will look like. As you see now, everything is in the past tense. So now we have really good coherence here. Point of view is very important. If you look at this paragraph, you have to keep the point of view of the same person throughout the whole paragraph. That's very, very helpful. If you look at this paragraph, the point of view is changing from the first sentence to the second sentence, and you don't want to do that. Here is a very good example of weak and strong coherence. The first paragraph where it says weak coherence is really not, it's an okay paragraph, right? You look at it, it's an okay paragraph, but it doesn't have strong coherence. It doesn't have strong coherence language in it. The next paragraph is even better, right? It has really strong coherence, and I've underlined the language, and you see some of the key language phrases repeated now. That gives stronger coherence, right? So maybe I should have called it weaker coherence and stronger coherence. But that first paragraph is good, but the next the paragraph below it is even better, much better, because of the coherence language that we built into that paragraph, right? So just remember that coherence is something that really allows a paragraph in an essay to flow smoothly, to build one on top of the other, right? Coherence is like a scaffold when you're making a building. A paragraph should have a flow from beginning to end, and that's done with very good coherence. All right, good luck, everybody. I wish you well, and if you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.
Okay, we've talked about cohesion and coherence. Now let's talk about concise writing. Concise writing is a key skill for getting a really, really high score. It's not easy, but if you want to know how you know somebody is a skilled writer, it's because they're able to write concisely. Writing concisely means every word in the sentence counts. Sometimes when I see student writing, they have a lot of articles and be verbs and helping verbs and just a lot of just extra frivolous language. And they create these super long sentences because they have so many extra words. Like you can have a long sentence where every word counts, okay? And there's a difference between that type of writing and having just extra words. So here are some keys to eliminating or being able to be concise in terms of your writing. So you want to be able to eliminate unnecessary determiners and modifiers. So for example, look here, this example. Any particular type of dessert is fine with me, right? Look at the more concise version. Any dessert is fine with me. Right, but look at these extra words. Particular type of dessert. Any dessert. Any dessert is the same thing as saying particular type of dessert. Now, some of you might be saying, well, the sentence is correct, so what does it matter? Well, again, concise writing is high-level writing. And we know this because when you look at a basic level English student, they have these types of sentences that are really long because they have just extra words. They don't have the ability to say the same thing with less. High-level English writing happens where you're able to say the same thing with less, the same impact with less. Balancing the budget by Friday is an impossibility without some kind of extra help. Again, extra language. Extra language. Now, some of you, again, you're going to say, but there's nothing wrong with it. I'm trying to tell you the difference between a high score on the rubric and a lower score on the rubric. Because lower level English students use that kind of writing, some kind of. So here we are again. Another way to be able to be more concise, change phrases into single words. Look here, the employee with ambition, the ambitious employee, the department showing the best performance, the best performing department. That kind of writing, that concise writing, where you're changing phrases into single words, is the type of writing that gets really high scores. When a grader sees that, they're like, wow, this person really knows how to write very, very well. When they see a lot of those extra words, it doesn't really impress them. So something else you can do is change the unnecessary words, that, who, which, clauses into phrases. Again, the report, which was recently released, the recently released report. All applicants who are interested in the job must. All job applicants must. Right? That is what, when we talk about concise writing, that's what we're talking about. That's what it means to write concisely. So we also have to avoid overusing expletives. Avoid overusing expletives at the beginning of a sentence. So I see this one a lot. It is the governor who signs or vetoes bills. There are 4 rules that should be observed, right? The governor signs or vetoes bills. 4 rules should be observed. That is concise writing. That is the kind of writing that will get you a really, really high score. Use the active voice rather than the passive voice. An account was opened by Mrs. Sims. Mrs. Sims opened an account. When you're writing, 90% of your writing should be in the active voice. 90% of your writing should be in the active voice. When you write in the active voice, you avoid being wordy. There only are specific situations where you use the passive voice. So if you're just using the passive voice all over the whole essay or over the whole report, and you don't have the specific situation that calls for using the passive voice, you're going to get marked down for that. Right? Avoid overusing noun forms of verbs. The function of this department is the collection of accounts. This department collects accounts. The current focus of the medical profession is disease prevention. The medical profession currently focuses on disease prevention. Look at this. Look at this last sentence. I just want to point out to you extra words, right? Of, the, is, extra words. Here, in this sentence at the bottom, every word is necessary. Every word is necessary. That's what concise writing is. Everything is necessary. Everything is needed. Too many times students write sentences that have language that is not needed. All right, so you have to also reword unnecessary or infinitive phrases. Reword unnecessary or infinitive phrases. Some infinitive phrases can be converted into finite verbs or brief noun phrases. Making such changes often results in the replacement of a be verb with an action verb, right? So example, the duty of a clerk is to check all incoming mail, and to record it. A clerk checks and records all incoming mail. That is a concise sentence, right? So a lot of times when I'm writing compound sentences or complex sentences, my sentences are longer, but my sentences are concise. All right, sometimes you want to combine sentences to avoid wordiness. Exactly. This is why I preach having the ability to write compound and complex sentences, because it cuts out so many extra words. In this top sentence, we have 22 words. In this bottom sentence, we have 17 words. Now, some of you may say, well, that's just 5 words. Yes, but it makes a difference. Concise writing reads better. The best writers write concisely. This is what you have to do if you want a really, really high score, right? So don't come and ask me something like, well, can I be wordy? You really are making it a challenge for a grader to give you a high score if you are extremely wordy in your sentences. Because it's not impressive. Wordiness is not impressive. Being concise is really, really impressive. So if you're asking me about getting a high score, it's all about your ability to impress the grader. Right? So you have to also eliminate some common wordy expressions. Avoid there is and there are constructions. Cut them out. Stop using them. Stop using them. All right? If you want to write more concisely, stop using there is and there are. Just stop. Because it sounds better when you don't use them. It's better writing. Avoid using the first person, right? Wordy. I think that George's wife is unhappy because George ignores her. George's wife is unhappy because George ignores her. This is a proper sentence. This is a high-level sentence. This first sentence is a basic-level sentence, right? I hope that you're seeing the difference between basic-level writing and advanced-level writing, right? Sometimes people think, well, it's just about vocabulary. No, it's not. It's more about sentence structure, right? It's more about sentence structure. So, do you have any questions? If you have any questions about concise writing, let me know. I'm going to include a couple of exercises, and you should do those exercises to work on your ability to do concise writing. So thanks a lot, and I will talk to you soon. Okay, now let's have a short discussion about common grammar or word choice mistakes. These are some of the fatal flaws that lower grades. The most common. Now, academic writing is much different than other forms of writing because in academic writing, you don't write the way you speak. You don't use slang, right? Do not expect the reader to know what you mean. Sometimes in other types of writing, you might assume the reader knows what you mean. In academic writing, you don't assume anything, right? When you make assumptions, or as I like to say, when you write in a way that requires inferencing, if you write in a way that requires inferencing or making inferences, you're about to have a problem in terms of your score. Don't write in fragments, use complete sentences, always use standard written English. Here are some bad habits to avoid in academic writing. Don't use you. Having inconsistent person. Having inconsistent tense, abbreviations, using slang, wanna, gonna. It's okay to use that in speaking, but not in writing. Don't use etc. Avoid ending verbs with en or in instead of ing, waiting, watching. Some of you might think it's funny, but I see it a lot. Be careful with your pronoun, antecedent, agreement, and reference, right? A lot of times students use these pronouns wrong. They use them wrongly. And so you have to make sure that you're able to write in a way that uses proper pronouns. Mechanical rules. Never begin a sentence with a number. Spell it out. All numbers below 100 should be spelled out. Those above 100 are optional, but you should be consistent. Here are some commonly misspelled words you have to be careful with, right? I see this very often, and you want to make sure that you don't make these simple, basic mistakes. If there's any slide that you want to spend some more time looking at, just pause the video and you can look at it a little bit longer. Unnecessary repetition, right? Unnecessary repetition. Now, remember I told you, sometimes when being for coherence and cohesion, you might have some parts where you have repetition, but we're talking about unnecessary repetition. And so if you are, being repetitive in your writing, look here, a round circle. A circle is automatically round. Refer back, right? The whole entire world. This is the kind of writing that you have to be kind of careful with because it's unnecessary repetition. Be careful with some words and phrases to avoid. You want to try to avoid contractions. This is difficult, and even sometimes I might make a mistake and use a contraction, right? It's difficult sometimes because in many of your English language schools, they don't tell you to avoid contractions in academic writing. And so sometimes it's a really difficult habit to break for even a native speaker. Avoid beginning sentences with conjunctions, right? There are no such, be careful with words that don't exist. Be careful of capitalizing words that should not be capitalizing. So these are some of the things that you have to be careful with in terms of words and phrases to avoid. It's very important that you know your parts of speech and use your parts of speech correctly. Here are some more specifics in terms of errors. Fragments. Oh, fragments, right? You got to be careful with fragments. Look at these examples of fragments. First, the lack of exercise. Period. Well, what about it? Okay, what about it? That's a fragment. What are you talking about? What about the lack of exercise? Although the number falling. For example, fast food, sweet things, and oily food. These are fragments. When it says fragment, it means you have a period and it's an incomplete thought. Very often this happens because a student can't write compound sentences correctly and complex sentences correctly. And when you're not able to do that, you end up writing fragments. Now here you can look at these examples and you can see how those sentences will be written so that they're not fragments. Comma splices. Comma splices are a type of right? They're sentences that should be separate but are joined with a comma. They're sentences that should be separate but are joined with a comma. Right? In the past, people did not have cars, they used to walk. Right? Why is this a run-on? Right? Because there should be something, there's no proper comma placement. Heart disease is a big problem, it kills thousands of people. Heart disease is a big problem because it kills thousands of people. Our modern life is very easy. Jobs are easier than they were 50 years ago because since, right? So very often in essay writing, I see comma splices. And comma splices are a huge grammatical mistake that you have to stop doing. Right? You can go ahead and these are some ways that you can fix comma splice problems, right? You can use a period, you can use a semicolon, you can use a comma and a coordinating conjunction, or you can use a subordinating conjunction. Your coordinating conjunctions are compound sentences. Your subordinating conjunctions are complex sentences, right? But these are 4 ways that you can practice being able to avoid comma splices. It all comes from writing sentences correctly. Now, if you're just using a lot of periods, that's going to make you fall more into the simplistic type of writing and you won't get a really high score for it. It'll be correct, but you won't get a really high score for it. If you're using method 3 and method 4, you're going to get a higher score for doing it correctly. These are some examples of how to fix comma splices. So again, if you need to, stop the screen right here and take a look at how we fix these comma splices. Look at A, and then look at the examples of how we fix the comma splices. Here are a few more comma splice examples, all right? You can look and see how these things were fixed. Run-on sentences. A run-on sentence is a sentence comprised of 2 or more independent clauses not properly separated, right? So again, we're talking about really comma splices again. It happens because there's a lack of punctuation or conjunctions, incorrect punctuation, a comma splice, right? A run-on sentence is not simply a long sentence. My favorite Mediterranean spread is hummus. It is very garlicky. What's the problem here? Because, since, or period. It is nearly 5:30. We cannot reach town before dark. You're missing a conjunction. So, I have to go to the store. I need to buy milk. You either have to be very simplistic. I have to go to the store, period. I need milk. I need to buy milk, period. Or to get a higher score, use a subordinating conjunction. I have to go to the store because I need to buy milk. These are more examples of run-on sentences. You have an example on the left and an example on the right, okay? Again, if you feel like I'm going through some parts too quickly for you, stop the video, take a look, and read more carefully. Sometimes you have to be careful with missing main components of sentences, right? Sentences have a subject and a predicate, and very often students leave out the subject or leave out the predicate. And when you do that, you're creating a grammar problem. Subject-verb agreement, right? In order for a sentence to be grammatically correct, its subject and corresponding verb must agree, right? They must agree. So this is a big problem for students. And now for most students, if I ask them the rule, they know the rule, but what most students have trouble with is performance of the rule. Now, performance of the rule gets better if you're doing focused practice, right? If you're doing focused practice. So sometimes you might write a paragraph, and if you have problems with subject-verb agreement, you might say, you know what? When I write this paragraph, I'm going to just focus on my subject-verb agreement. I'm going to be mindful and focus on my subject-verb agreement to make sure that I'm able to get it correct and perfect my ability to do that. Here's some examples of subject-verb agreement errors. Look at example 1 and look at example 2. Right? See if you can spot the difference. An important part of my life have been. Right? It should be an important part of my life has been. My life has been, not my life have been. They have. We have. Right? He has. She has. My life has. Adding a plural S. This is another big issue that I see sometimes the students leave off. This is a grammar mistake that you have to be very careful with, everybody. Pronouns. Misusing pronouns. Again, big grammatical problem. Stop here and read about this so you can learn more about misusing pronouns so you can avoid making that mistake. No comma after introductory phrase, right? Like while. While a Thanksgiving commercial play. While a Thanksgiving, you have to make sure that you have your comma, right? So while a Thanksgiving commercial played on the TV, right? That's the introductory phrase, right? While a Thanksgiving commercial played on the TV, that's the introductory phrase. It's also a dependent clause, right? So it's an introductory phrase and dependent clause, and that means we need to have a comma after TV. You must have a comma after TV.
split infinitives. This is really, really, really technical here, right? It's not really grammatically wrong. It's more about style and what sounds better, right? So when you see something where it says here incorrect, it's not grammatically incorrect. It's just stylistically incorrect, okay? It's stylistically incorrect. Your dangly modifiers. Dangly modifiers are a big problem. Look at this example down here. By studying hard, grades will be improved. It contains a dangly modifier because it doesn't identify who will be studying hard. So look at the revised sentence here. When students study hard, their grades will improve. Right? Dangling modifier means is hanging there, but it's not being said. Right? It's not there. It has to be there. It's missing. It's a dangling modifier. Be careful with your word choice mistakes, misused words. Example, there were averse effects, and it should be there were adverse effects. So I see a lot of word choice mistakes. So you have to be careful with that. Be careful with unwanted connotations or meanings. I see this a lot. Example, I sprayed the ants in their personal places. Yeah, that's grammatically correct, but it doesn't have any real meaning, right? You're not spraying them in their personal places. I sprayed the ants in their hiding places. Again, those are connotation mistakes. Connotation mistakes. And sometimes if you only have one of them, it's okay. But sometimes I read essays and people have 10 connotation mistakes. And when you have that many connotation mistakes with word choice, that means that you're having issues with using the English language properly. And that's what lowers your score. Complex words, where a shorter or simpler word will do. Okay? So a lot of times people try to use these big words, these big words. And sometimes I'm making comments to students and I'm saying, well, I have no idea what you're talking about, right? Because you're using some big complex word and you're not using it correctly or it's contextually used incorrectly. Be careful with awkward word choice mistakes, right? You can take a look at this example, the revision and the reason for the change, and get an example of what I'm talking about in terms of awkward word choice. Words that are similar to each other but convey the wrong meaning. Again, look at the example, the revision, and the reason for the change so you can understand what that means. Words that convey finer shades of meaning. Okay? This is where it gets a little bit more technical. But look here. Previously, a substantial number of patients with HCAP were defined as having. Previously, a substantial number of patients with HCAP were diagnosed as having. Right? Again, were defined as having is not really stylistically, contextually correct. Right? The word you should be using is diagnosed. Now, what I'm talking about are the things that make a difference between somebody that gets an intermediate level score, right, or a mid-range score, and somebody that gets a really high level score. These are the kind of things that make a difference. And some of you are not seeing all these things I'm talking about. These are the kind of things that people are doing that are scoring on the upper scale of the rubric, right? If you're not able to do these things I'm talking about and do these things consistently, you're going to have a little bit of trouble scoring on the upper scale of the rubric, right? So if you want to learn more about avoiding mistakes, right, you can get more help. There's an attachment. And if you follow that attachment, there's a link to a grammar diagnostic test. You can take that grammar diagnostic test and you can learn a lot more about your grammar issues. And also after you take that diagnostic test, they give you rule advice on how to correct your grammar mistakes. Okay? So I hope this was helpful for you. Because I talk a lot about your general English needs to really match your skills that you're learning in the course, right? So I just wanted to mention these things briefly. This is not a general English course, right? I focus more on the strategies and tactics you need for the exam. But I just wanted to mention some of these things because these are issues that come up that some of you need to really go out and do some more investigation and correct within your writing, okay? So take care. Hi, thank you for joining me in this new section to our IELTS course, where we're going to be covering the computer-based test. And in this first lecture, we're going to be looking at the basic foundations of the computer-based test. And really what I'm going to do here is just answer a lot of the questions that students have been asking me over the past few months about the computer-based test. So let's go ahead and get into it. First, let's go over some basic questions and answers. So to start off, have there been any format changes between the paper test and the computer-based test? No, there are no format changes. The paper-based test and the computer-based test use the exact same format, the exact same questions. Next, should you take the paper test or the computer test? I get asked that question a lot. Honestly, it's really a personal choice. It's whatever fits your comfort level and your particular skill set. Finally, which format is more difficult? Is the computer more difficult or is the paper-based test more difficult? Well, they have the exact same question types, scoring, level of difficulty, and content. Everything is equal. What really makes it more or less challenging for a student is how comfortable you are with the computer. Now, let's go over a few more basic questions and answers. Registration is exactly the same as the paper-based test. It's the exact same registration process. There is no on-demand testing. Now, let's talk about the computers and the keyboards. No, you cannot bring your own. I've been asked that question a few times. You cannot bring your own computer and keyboard. You must use the center-provided equipment on how to use a computer. You have to come into that test knowing basic computer skills. Now, the test is done on a basis of 0 to 9 band scores. Now, just like on the paper-based test, on the computer-based test, there are 4 sections. Listening is exactly the same. You have 4 sections, 10 questions per section. It gets gradually more difficult as you move through the sections. Then you have the reading part. The academic paper is the same as the academic on the computer. The general paper test is the same as the general on the computer. Same question types, same strategies, same tactics. The application is a little bit different due to the tools that you have to use and the tools available on the computer. Now the writing, again, the same between both tests. You have a task 1 and a task 2. And for the speaking part, the computer and the paper-based and the computer-based exams both use in-person testing. So there you have it. Those are the basic foundations of the paper-based test, of the computer-based test. And in this next video that we're going to go over, we're going to look at some pros and cons when it comes to the computer-based test versus the paper-based test. So good luck, and I look forward to talking to you in the next video. Talk to you soon. Okay, now that we have covered the basic foundations of the computer-based test, let's go ahead and take a look at the pros and cons in terms of the paper test versus the computer-based test. And maybe this will help you do a better job of deciding which version of the IELTS exam that you really want to take. So let's go ahead and get into it. First, let's look at some general pros and cons, right? I'm not going to go over all of these step by step, because if you want to, you can kind of stop the video and read through the pros and read through the cons. But I'll go over some of these. First, let's look at the pros. Typing is generally faster than writing essays, right? For most of us that are really computer literate, and a lot of people, I guess in the modern times, we use a computer for almost everything. So a lot of you are probably more comfortable typing than writing. And I guess that depends on what country you're from and how you kind of grow up. In terms of the computer screen is large, so you might be able to see a little bit better in terms of the reading and the listening. Another pro is you can get your results in like 5 to 7 days, which is great. You have the same question types as the paper-based test. So when you take the computer-based test, there won't be any surprises or anything that kind of stands out. We use the exact same strategies and tactics as the paper-based test. So all of these strategies and tactics that I've taught you in the previous sections, the strategies and the tactics are exactly the same. It's not necessary to teach any new strategies or any new tactics in regards to the paper-based test. It's exactly the same. Now, in terms of the cons, I guess one con could be typing is a requirement, because for some people, they're not very proficient at typing. So you must be able to type to do well in terms of the writing section. Also, when time is up, the screen closes right away. There's no extra time in terms of somebody coming around and collecting papers or writing one last thing down. Nope, when that time is over, screen goes blank. There's no warning in the last minute. That's a big con. In terms of the application of the strategies and tactics, it's a little bit different with the computer, because you have to be able to move, drag and drop, do a few things in differently than you would do it on the written paper. So just the fact of using a computer and you have to highlight things, and on the paper you would just underline them. So there are those kind of differences. Another con can definitely be distractions. You have the noise of the keyboard. People have their listening volume really high. And another big con is that there's less practice material for the computer-based test. However, I will say this. If you have been taking my course, and basically my course prepares you for the computer-based test, because when you're taking my course, everything is on the computer. So your eyes are used to reading on the computer, listening on the computer, everything is on the computer. So actually my course is really good preparation for the computer-based test. Now, let's go ahead and move into what are some listening pros and cons. Well, typing. Let's look at the pros first. Typing. You're going to be able to quickly correct mistakes, right? You're going to be able to quickly correct any mistakes that you make in terms of typing. You also should be able to highlight the text in terms of highlighting the keywords. It's a little bit tricky to do. It really takes practice doing it. That's something you really have to get used to doing. In terms of the time limit, you don't have to waste time rewriting answers at the end of the test. In regards to movement, the tab key really helps in terms of jumping from box to box very quickly. You can jump back to a previous question to change an answer very quickly. And in regards to marking, questions that you have not answered are marked in a different color. This really helps in terms of verifying that you've answered everything. Now, the listening cons. Again, I guess typing is a pro, but also is actually a con also. Because you must be able to type answers directly in the computer box. In addition, which is really, really tricky for some students, there must be simultaneous typing and listening, right? On the paper-based test, you have to simultaneously write and listen. Here you have to type and listen at the same time. Also, some students have run into issues in terms of the keyboard or the headphones not being in optimal conditions. That could be a con. In terms of time, now this is a big one, so pay attention. On the computer-based test, you don't have 10 minutes at the end as you do on the paper-based test. You only have 2 minutes at the end to check your answers. That's because you are writing your answers directly in the answer boxes. On the paper-based test, you might be writing your answers on the test booklet itself, and therefore they give you those 10 minutes to be able to transfer answers. On the computer-based test, you only have 2 minutes. In terms of movement, you must be able to jump the cursor box to box. Basically, you have to move that cursor from box to box. And you might have to move answers from one area to another. In other words, drag and drop. And also you have to be able to move around on the map question in terms of clicking the boxes or clicking in the right box in terms of where a particular place is located. And finally, a big con in terms of the marking and underlining. On the paper-based test, you can underline keywords, circle keywords. On the listening test, you have to highlight the words. And unless you're really adept at doing it, it's a little bit tricky. And so when you watch me show you in some of the demonstration videos on the listening section, I'll show you how you have to be able to do that because it is a little bit tricky to do it. Now, let's go ahead and move into the reading section of the computer-based test. All right, so let's look at the reading pros. Screen arrangement. This is great. The passage is on the left, the questions are on the right. That is totally awesome to have the passage on the left and the questions on the right. As you know, with the paper-based test, you're flipping pages back and forth. On the computer-based test, you can see everything right in front of you. That's a big, big pro. In terms of readability, you have the ability to increase the font size. You can scroll up and down fast, no page flipping. Also in the reading section, you can highlight. You can make notes. You can highlight text in the reading passage that relates to one of the questions. You can also make notes on the reading passage in terms of if something relates to, for example, a paragraph location question and something relates to one of those answer choices. Another thing you can do is in regards to copying and pasting. Now you can copy and paste from the passage and paste the answer in the box. This will reduce typos. Now, some of the reading cons in terms of just computer reading, right? So if you're not really comfortable reading on a computer, or it's not something that you're used to doing in terms of your head position and with your eyes, it can be a little bit difficult in terms of computer reading. Readability. For some students, the screen can bother their eyes if you're looking at the screen for a long time. Screen fatigue. Some people get tired from looking at a screen for a long time. And finally, you have different passages. What I mean by that, and this is something that I've heard from some students and at some centers, is that students doing the exam on the same day in the actual same center can have different passages. They're at the same difficulty level, but they may have different passages. I'm not sure if this is true across the board. This is just something that's been reported. Now let's take a look at the writing section. All right, so let's look at the IELTS, CPT, CDT writing pros. Automatic word count. How awesome is that? Automatic word count. You can see the word count as you are typing the essay. That means that you can know if you have enough words now. Typing. Most of you can type faster than you write. Essay management. You can move quickly through the essay, right? It's already a natural process to type essays on a computer for most of you. Also, they will give you pencil and paper if you ask for it. And they, in some centers, also have these noise-canceling headphones, which can be very helpful also. Now, in terms of the cons with writing, typing speed. You must be able to actually type at a decent speed. No two-finger typing, right? So if typing speed is a big problem for you, you might want to consider doing the paper-based test while it's still available. I honestly think that within the next few years, the IELTS exam is going to become totally computer-based, just like the TOEFL exam. I really think that's the direction that they're heading in. Another con is that you can have a tendency to write too much. It's very, very easy to over-type because you're typing, right? It's very easy to type too much. So really stick to the strategy. Stick to it. More does not mean better. In fact, more often means worse. And finally, in terms of writing, distractions are a con. You have a lot of people pounding the keyboard at the same time, right? That is a big distraction sometimes. So you really have to be used to that. All right, so I wish you a lot of success. I want you to go get that band score that you need. In the next few lectures, I'm going to be demonstrating how you go through the listening for the computer-based test, just in terms of format and structure and typing answers, just so you can be familiar with what you are able to do and what you have to do. And as I'm going through those lectures, I will touch on strategy and remind you of strategy. As I've told you, the strategy for the paper-based test and the strategy for the computer-based test is exactly the same. So I don't have anything new to tell you in terms of strategy. It's the exact same strategy, but I will demonstrate for you the process. And as I'm going through the process, I will also take the time to kind of review the strategy in terms of answering certain questions, okay? So I will talk to you soon and have a great day. Okay, in this lecture, I'm going to be taking you through a sample of the IELTS computer-based test for listening. So when you're doing the IELTS computer-based test, you're going to see a screen that looks like this right now. And it's going to ask you to confirm your details with your name and your date of birth and your candidate number, make sure everything's correct. And then you click on my details are correct. And then they ask you to put on your headphones, make sure you can hear everything. Make sure you do that. So
please change the
play the
volume
sound.
using the bar in the top right corner.
Right, make sure that you can hear things. Now over here, you can turn the volume up or down. I'm going to turn the volume all the way up. And then once you can make sure that you can hear things okay, then you want to go ahead and move forward. If you can't hear things okay, then please talk to the invigilator and let them know, hey, I'm having a headphone problem. I'm only hearing in one ear. Can you give me another set? Next, you move to the next screen, and they're going to tell you in terms of how long, the basic instructions, the same basic instructions that you get for the paper-based test, right? And then after that, you're ready to begin, right? And so they'll let you know it's time to begin after they read through the instructions. You would press start the test. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and listen and answer the questions. And then I'll go back. And when I go back, I'll go through the explanation of the answers. But first, I'm going to kind of explain some things to you in terms of where things are on the screen here. Right, so at the top, you see you have a clock right there. You have the sound, and here we have the different parts in terms of, now you can highlight text like this, right? First, we're looking for a shape. Then we're looking for how old, right? And then I'm looking for these keywords, something with a set of. Now you can do this, but you have to be very good, right? The seats are covered in what kind of material. So you can highlight along the way.
348831.
Oh, hello. I'm calling about your advertisement in the local paper.
Oh, well, there were two ads, actually. Was it the one for second-hand furniture?
That's right, yes. Last Thursday.
Oh, yes. Some of it's already gone, I'm afraid, but what exactly were you interested in?
Mainly the dining room furniture, especially the table. Has that gone yet?
Not yet.
Oh, good. Can you tell me a bit about it?
Well, it's round. I'm not sure of the exact measurements, but it's medium size. It seats about 6.
And how old is it?
Let's see, 10 years. No, it must be 12 by now.
And the advertisement said you were asking £25 for that?
That's right.
And do you still have the dining chairs?
Yes, it's a set of 4 chairs. There were 2 more, but over the years a couple have disappeared.
What are they like?
Quite nice. They've got upholstered seats. You know, they're covered in material to make them more comfortable to sit on. That's green, but you could change it, of course, if you wanted something different.
What sort of condition are they in?
I'd say reasonable. They've had a bit of wear, and we're asking £20 for those.
Right. And the other thing I wanted to ask about was the desk. Can you tell me roughly how long the top is, so I know if it'll fit in my room?
Let's see, it's 75 centimetres high, I know, and the length's 1 metre 20, and it's 40 centimetres deep. It's got 3 drawers. The top one's got a lock, so you can keep your valuables there.
And you were asking £50 for that?
Yes, it's a bit more because it's in good condition. But if you want to take the other things too, I could let you have it for 40.
Okay, all right, so as you can see, that's what you have to be able to do. Now, one thing you'll notice is I'm able to go from box to box by pressing tab, right? Or I could just move the cursor and go from box to box. I like pressing the tab key, T-A-B. I like pressing the tab key because I think pressing the tab key is a little bit faster. Now, in terms of the answers, the first one we have is round. We know it was round because we know we're looking for a shape. And the person mentioned the shape. When she said, can you tell me about it? And he said, well, it's round. I know I'm listening for some type of shape. And after that, he said a few more things in terms of the exact measurements and medium size, but he gave no other answer regarding shape. Then he moved down to the age. Now, here is, again, you know, as I've told you before, whenever you're dealing with a number, right? Whenever you're dealing with a number, you have to be able to manage and handle them giving more than one number. They're going to do that. So at first they said, it's 10 years. Then he said, no, correction, right? They like to do that, give a correction. And then he said, it must be 12 by now. Then we move down to the set of or how many, and they literally said it's a set of 4 chairs. Now, again, here comes another trap answer, because what they love to do is a lot of times they'll give the answer choice and they'll give you some more information about the chairs that has nothing to do with the answer, right? After they gave you the answer choice, they said there were 2 more, but over the years, a couple have disappeared, right? So you don't put 6 as an answer, okay? You don't put 6 as an answer, all right? So there's a timer on here. There's 1 minute left, so this is going to stop. So I'm going to load up another screen very quickly. Okay, so let's keep going from where we left off before. And sorry about the pause there for a second. And so when we're looking at this, and we're right now on where they're talking about the dining chairs, and they said set of, and they said that there were a set of 4 chairs, right? A set of 4 chairs is what they said. And so next we're moving forward and looking at what the seats are covered in. So the answer there is green. Now, some of you may have made the mistake of putting the answer as being comfortable, right? But the seats can't be covered in comfortable. That can't be the answer choice. They're covered in something. They're covered in a type of material, right? So so we're listening for what they say. And what they said was, they're covered in material to make them more comfortable to sit on. That's green. That's green, right? So when they use the word that, what is that? The word that, it's a reference pronoun. It's referring to what? The material. So the answer is going to be green. So you would type in green as the answer choice. Next, the person said, well, what condition are they in? That lets us know. Well, now we're moved on to the next question. And the person said, I'd say reasonable, right? So here what they're doing is they're testing, does this person know how to type the word reasonable correctly? It's really a spelling test here because they said it very, very directly, right? He said, I'd say they're reasonable. That's a type of condition. Then finally, it says length. We know we're dealing with a number. We know we're dealing with a number. What do you know about numbers? And I've told you about numbers. They're going to play around. So we're listening for length. So first they say it's 75 centimeters high. We know that's not our answer. Then they say the length is 1 meter 20, 1.20. Right? Then they go on and say something else is 40 centimeters. But we're listening for length. But they're going to try to confuse you by giving you multiple numbers. That's why it's important to recognize the keywords before that you're listening to. So really, if you're doing the test, you would kind of highlight, I'm listening for length. Right? That's what I'm listening for is the length. I'm listening for what kind of condition are they in, right? So you can highlight things. And then finally, they talk about the top drawer, and the person literally said the top drawer has a lock, right? So all you have to do is type the word lock, okay? And, you have to make sure you kind of check your spelling as you go, because remember, at the end, they're only going to give you 2 minutes at the end, okay? Okay, in this video, we're going to be going through a map question. Now, I know the map question is difficult for a lot of people. And so on the computer-based test, this is what a map question will look like, right? So you have your basic map over here on the left-hand side. You have your directions, north, west, south, east. And then when you have a map question, you have to just look at the map, right? So you're going to always start at the Welcome Center. You're going to always start at the Welcome Center. And then you want to make sure you also look at the street names in terms of Elm Street, Main Street, Maple Street, Ash Street, Oak Street, because they're going to use these street names and these different locations. The Welcome Center, we have a bank there, we have a cafe here, we have a gift shop here, right? They're going to use those things to really, those items to really help you in terms of knowing the exact location of the place they're talking about. Now, a map question goes in order. That means they're going to do the quilt shop first, then they're going to do the handicrafts museum, then the schoolhouse. Now, when you have this kind of question, you see there's a clock going up there. Actually, right now, they're speaking right now. I just have the volume turned down, so I can kind of explain this to you. I'll open up another window, and we'll go ahead and do their practice that they have here. But when you hear where the quilt shop is, you have to mark where it is. I'm just randomly choosing answers. I'm saying these are right or wrong. But that would be, say that's B, and then D, and then C. You choose where the answers are. Now, if you want to change this answer right here for B and change it to D, you just click in D. If you want to change the handicraft from D and change it to A, you click in A. Right? So that's how you can really choose the different answer choices that you have. But it's going to go in order, right? Quilt shop, then handicraft, and schoolhouse. So with a map question, what they're always giving you is the route, the direction, the placement, right? And then the actual answer choice. And so you just have to follow along. Where they're starting, street names, be aware when they're using words like across from, next to, the middle of, adjacent to, north, upper corner, upper right corner, at the intersection of, right? You have to, on the opposite side of, on the west side or the north side of the street, you have to be aware of all those types of directions to be able to handle a map or diagram question very, very well. Okay? So we're going to go ahead and go into, I'm going to close this window, and we're going to go into another window so you can be able to actually hear, and we can go through answering. And then after answering, I will explain where I got the answers from. Okay? All right, so let's go ahead and do this. Now, strategy is the same. You know, in all the other previous map questions, map diagram questions that I've given you in previous lectures, the strategy is the same, right? Everything is the same.
but we just have to apply it using a computer. So let's have a look.
All right. Those of you who want to go on the ride, please just wait a moment while I give some directions to the rest of the group. You'll notice that the Welcome Center, where we are, is located on the southwest corner of Elm and Main Streets. For those of you interested in doing a little shopping, on the other side of Main Street, you can see a wonderful quilt shop. These are handmade blankets, which are usually made from patches of leftover material. They make wonderful gifts, but let me warn you, it will be hard to leave that shop, so you may want to save that for last. The next street up Main is Ash Street. On the south side of Ash is a handicrafts museum worth a look. You'll be amazed at the variety of handmade crafts there. On Main Street, in the middle of the block past Ash, but before Oak Street, is a traditional one-room schoolhouse. Please be as quiet as possible and do not take photographs, as school is in session.
Okay. All right. And so for the quilt shop, they said that we have to go to, for those who are interested in doing a little shopping, you know, on the other side of Main Street, you can see a wonderful quilt shop. So on the other side of Main Street, this is Main Street. We're at the Welcome Center. He said on the other side of Main Street, right, is H. And then next he told us to go up to Ash Street. Right here's Ash Street. And he said on the south side of Ash Street, that has to be A. Can't be, the only other building on the south side is bank. Is the bank. So A has to be our answer choice. Then he said, for the last one, he said on Main Street. So on Main Street, he said in the middle of the block, right? It has to be C. In the middle of the block. And he said before Oak Street. So we're on Main Street after Ash, before Oak, in the middle of the block. That means the answer choice has to be C, right? But that's how you go through and fill in the different squares. That's how you go through and fill in the different squares for doing a map question. You have to be able to listen very carefully, follow along with the directions, and then click in the right boxes. That's what you have to be able to do. All right? Thank you very much. Okay, now in this next question set for the IELTS computer-based listening test, we're going to be looking at a matching question. Basically, this is the type of question where you're going to listen to a person giving a speech, not a speech, but giving a short talk, and they're going to usually go through a list of people and their responsibilities or duties that they have. Now, keep in mind that it goes in order, right? It goes in order. So they're going to talk about Mary Brown first, then John Stevens, and then Allison Jones. Remember over here, you can control the volume. Now I'm going to turn the volume down because right now I'm just kind of explaining to you in terms of the process of doing this kind of question. Now, when you're doing this kind of question, you have to be able to move things in the boxes. So for example, if Mary Brown was finance, then we move the finance over there. Now, if I don't like that answer, I can take it out. Or we can go ahead and move down to the next one. Right, but they go in order. So we're going to start with Mary Brown first. Now, keep in mind, with this kind of question, this is really a synonyms question because they're going to say what Mary Brown does. So, for example, they might say, Mary Brown works with our money. She manages the money, right? So you have to be able to look and see, well, what is the synonym for that? Okay, the synonym, if they say she manages money, the synonym will be that she basically works in finance, right? And then after that, they're going to switch and move down to the next person, John Stevens. And then they're going to tell you what John Stevens does, but they're not going to say these exact words. They're not going to say these exact words, right? They're going to say synonyms. And sometimes they might say 2 or 3 synonyms, right, of the same word, okay? And then after John Stevens, they'll move down to Allison Jones and then Tim Smith, and excuse me. And then they'll move down to Jenny James, right? So it goes in order. It goes in order. And basically, it's synonyms. It's all about synonyms. Hear the person's name. They'll tell you what they do. Look at the list and find the matching answer. And then you click with the right button and you move it over to where you want it to go. If you don't like that answer, you want to change it, move it back, and then you can change it, okay? But it goes in order, so we're going to start there in terms of with Mary Brown first. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to the next screen, and then we'll go ahead and listen to it, and then afterwards, I will kind of answer it and then go over the answer choices in terms of what was the synonym language that you should have heard.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to all our staff on this summer's Kids Camp. It's nice to see some familiar faces back from last year. Let's hope this year's camp is as much fun for the kids as last year. In our orientation programme this morning, I will introduce you to all the people you need to know at the camp. They each have a different responsibility in the centre, so it's a good idea to make a note of who does what. Well, first of all, you all know me, Jill Andrews. I'm the coordinator here. The next person you need to know is Mary Brown. She's our accommodation officer, so she deals with all the housekeeping matters concerning both the children's dormitories and your own accommodation wing. Next, we have John Stevens, who is our catering manager, and he organises all the menus. If you have any special dietary requirements, speak to John and he'll do his best to accommodate you. We sometimes find that the children complain about not liking certain meals, so if there's a real problem, you should get John involved. Then we have Alison Jones. She plans all the excursions and does all the bookings for the tour buses, etc. Alison also accompanies the children on the excursions and is responsible for making sure that the same number of children return to the centre as leave it. Tim Smith is in charge of physical education. He'll organise the big athletics carnival that we have at the end of the camp, but he'll also plan the individual training sessions for the kids. We have to remember that exercise is one of the key features of this camp. Last but not least is our wonderful Jenny James. She looks after any of the children who are homesick or have problems getting on with other kids here. So don't feel you have to deal with those problems yourself. A chat with Jenny usually does the trick. You'll notice that this year we don't have a resident first aid person. Instead, we have a qualified nurse on call at all times should anyone fall ill.
Okay, so there you have it. Now, very quickly, in terms of going through the synonyms that they used. So for Mary Brown, the answer was rooms. And what they said about Mary Brown is she's in charge of accommodations. Accommodation is a synonym for room. Also, they said that she is concerned about the dormitories, which is another synonym for room. Next, with John Stevens, his answer is he's in charge of food. And for John, they say he's the catering manager. Catering is food. They also said he organizes the menus, food. You talked to him about the meals, food. So the answer is food. The synonym is food. Next, for Alison Jones, they said she's in charge of excursions. Excursion is a synonym for the word trip. Excursion is a synonym for the word trip. Then we have Tim Smith, and they said Tim Smith is in charge of physical education. What is the synonym for physical education? Sports. Then finally with Jenny James, that was the most tricky one probably. With Jenny James, she looks after children who are homesick or who are having trouble getting along with other children. And the synonym for that is kids counseling. Okay, kids counseling. They said that you should go and have a chat with Jenny. So that deals with kids counseling. So that's how a matching question works on the computer-based IELTS exam. You have to be able to match what they say is the person's responsibilities with the synonym in the list. It is a synonyms test, right? It's a synonyms test. So I hope that that's more clear to you and that you understand it a little bit better. I'll talk to you soon. Okay, in this one, we're looking at a multiple choice question where you have multiple possible choices to choose from. On the paper-based test, they'll give you A, B, C. Here, you just have to click in which of these circles is the correct answer. So they don't give you A, B, and C. The strategy on this question is the same as on the paper-based test, right? So as I told you, I think early on, you can actually highlight text, right? So why she choose to study in the East End? That's what we want to know here. Why? Number two, we want to know her main source of materials. That's what we're listening for. Main source. That's going to give. This is the language that will be connected to the answer choice. And then we want to know in number three, what was the difficulty that she had with her dissertation? What difficulty did she have with the dissertation? Right. So it's a little more tricky to do the highlighting on the computer-based test, but it can be done. Right. It can be done, and you have to be able to do that in 20 or 30 seconds, depending on how many questions they give you. But I like to do that because it helps me to focus on what answer choice is going to be connected to what answer choice will be connected to that language. Because remember, with a multiple choice question, they're going to give you all the answer choices. They're going to give you all the answer choices. They're going to talk about places and names, books, background. They're going to talk about books, newspapers, interviews, writing a draft, organizing information, organizing what she collected, finding enough relevant sources. They're going to say all the answer choices, right? So remember, for these types of questions, we wanted to try our best to avoid exact language answers because that's not a test of your English ability, right? A test of your English ability is when they're requiring you to be able to hear an answer choice and then pick between A, B, and C, which one is the synonym for that answer choice that they said. That's what you have to be able to do with this kind of question. Now,
The questions are going to go in order. They're going to go for number 1, then they're going to go up to number 2, and then they're going to go to number 3. They always go in order. You have to listen for the language of the question, then listen for the answer choice, right? Listen for the answer choice. It's very important, right? Number 1, we want to know why she chose to study there. Why did she choose to study there? Number 2, we want to know what was her main source. That's key. Main source, because they're going to use synonyms for that. They're going to use synonyms for that. And then finally, we have synonyms for difficulty. Why was it difficult? Why was it hard? Why was it a challenge? Why was it an issue? Right? You're listening for that language. Okay? All right, so I'm going to go to another one so you can actually hear the audio. And all of this is free online. This is their free practice, and I'm going through it with you because students have requested that I kind of show how to manage the computer-based test, and that's what we're doing now. Same strategy as paper-based test, exact same strategy. You just have to apply that strategy in a computerized format. Now, for every question, you don't have to go through on the actual exam. You go through this stuff one time with your details are correct and continue and start the test. You do that one time. I'm doing it because I'm loading up multiple tabs, and so the questions are actually separated. They're not all together.
Right, Judy, this week it's your turn to bring us up to date on your dissertation. So?
I finished the basic research and planning and the first draft, and hopefully I can start writing the final version now.
Good. Not everyone knows your subject, so you'd better introduce it.
I've chosen to study everyday life in the East End of London in the early 20th century. Lots of books have been published about the East End, covering everything from health to how roads and districts got their names. So you might think it's an obvious subject to pick, but in fact, I was brought up there, and I've always been interested in finding out how the area shaped my upbringing.
What materials did you use in your research?
As I said, a lot's been written about the area, and I used some of it to get an idea of what to cover, but the bulk of my work is based on the elderly people from the area who I managed to contact and arrange to meet, and then recorded as they talked to me.
Mm-hmm.
And when they referred to any specific events, I looked them up in local newspapers from the time.
Was it difficult to get enough source material?
Not a bit. The problem started when I thought I had enough material and sat down to devise a workable filing system. It took ages, but I was really glad of it when I came to writing the draft. Otherwise, it would have been impossible.
Okay. All right. So the first answer is A. She wanted to understand her own background. So what did she say? Right? She said, she said that it was in terms of her own background. She used to live there, and because she used to live there, that's why she wanted to find out more about the area. In terms of the main source of materials, she said the bulk of her work, or the bulk, the main source, the bulk, which is synonym for main source, came from talking to the elderly people and recording her talks with them. And then in terms of her difficulty, she was talking about the difficulty with her filing system, the synonym for that which is organizing what she collected, right? Now, you would have to really avoid the exact language. Like some people might have chosen C because they heard the word books. Stop doing that. Some people might have chosen B for number 2 because they heard the word newspapers. Stop doing that, right? That's what you have to really be careful with doing, right? You have to be careful with not doing that, not picking just because you hear a word being said, okay? But that's how you manage it for a multiple choice question like this. All right, so this is a multiple choice question, and we're still working on the computer-based test, looking at the different types of questions. So for this type of multiple choice question, we had one like this in one of the previous lectures. And with that one, what we were looking at, they didn't give us the wrong answer choices. They just gave us the 3 correct answer choices. But when you were listening, you heard the wrong answer choices being said also. Here, they're giving you the 3 correct answer choices, and they're giving you the wrong answer choices also. Now, keep in mind, you're going to hear everything. You're going to hear book reservations. You're going to hear reading room rules. You're going to hear catalog, disabled facilities, location of rooms, cafe, regular events, staff. You're going to hear all the answer choices. So, paying attention to the question is very, very important. So it says, which 3 things does the guide to the library have information about? Which 3 things does the guide to the library have information about? Right? So the answer choices have to be connected to the library guide, right? Now, some of you may think that the word guide is referring to a person, and it could. Keep in mind also that a guide also could refer to a book, okay? So, make sure when you're listening, you're saying, okay, my answer choice must be something in the guide, right? Something in the guide or something from the guide. That's what my answer choice is going to be. They're going to say other answer choices, but I ignore those answer choices if they're not connected to something that is in the guide or something that the guide has information about. If it's not connected to it in that type of way, it is a wrong answer choice. Be very careful with exact language, right? Be very, very careful with exact language. All right, so let's go ahead and have a listen to it, and then I'll kind of go over the answer choices. Okay.
And we also hold regular events at the library.
Do I have to book for any of the events?
No, that's not necessary. When you come into the library, do make sure you pick up a copy of the guide to the library. Of course, anything you need to know, such as how the catalogue system works, you can ask any member of staff. But the guide does contain basic information about our services. It doesn't include things like the special events, because they always change, but inside you'll find a plan of the library showing where, for example, the reading room is. It also tells you about our cafe in the basement, though that's not open at the moment because of building work we're having done to install disabled lifts. Oh, and if you can't find what you want on the shelf, there's a section about how to reserve books that tells you what you need to do.
Thanks. I'll remember to collect that when I come in.
Okay, so that was really straightforward, right? Very, very straightforward. Now, I think with this question, some of you may got tricked up and picked choice B because you heard the word reading room, right? But they didn't say anything about the reading room rules, okay? They didn't say reading room rules were in the guidebook, right? So you can't pretend like the word rules doesn't exist. You can't pretend like it doesn't exist, right? She said that what the person said when they were reading, let me see if I wrote some things down. Right, it says, inside you're going to find a plan of the library showing you where, for example, the reading room is. So the reading room was an example. So they're letting you know where rooms are. The reading room was an example. So the guide lets you know where rooms are, right? And then they also said next is that it, reference pronoun, it, meaning the guide, it tells you where the cafe is, right? They also said that. And then finally they said, if you can't find what you want, there's a section, again, they're talking about inside the guide. There's a section that lets you know how to reserve books. So that's where you get to book reservations, okay? The other answers were said in the very beginning. They said something about regular events at the library, but that was not connected to something in the guide. They also said early on about if you need to know about the catalog system, you can talk to one of the staff members. So again, the catalog system is not connected to something inside the guide. The word staff is not connected to something inside the guide. So that's what you have to do when you're doing this kind of question. You have to really pay attention to the language in the question, right? What three things does the guide have information about? Does the guide have information about? Now, of course, you could have highlighted it, and so you can make sure that you're paying attention. What does the guide have information about? Okay. All right. So that's how we do a multiple choice question like this. They have this exact same kind of question on the paper-based test. And so you use the exact same strategy that you use for the paper-based test. Okay. Thanks a lot and talk to you soon. Alrighty. In this video, we're looking at a short answer question. This is basically a fill the blank question. Not really fill the blank, but it's just short answers. They basically are asking you list 3 types of staff that the clothing company wants to recruit at present. Now, on the paper-based test, this is like 4 or 5 choices, and they will want to know which 3 of the things do they mention. Here, on the computer-based, it's still a pick 3 that you hear, but they don't give you any of the wrong answers here. So this is something you want to be aware of when it comes to the computer-based test, is you'll have a question like this where they're asking you to choose 3, but they're not going to give you the wrong answers that they're going to say also. So with this type of question, you have to be aware. They're going to tell you the 3 things that they want, the 3 types of staff that they want to recruit, but also they're going to tell you what they don't want. And that's the key to doing this kind of question. You have to be able to understand, you have to be able to tell the difference between a person when they're speaking and they say they do want this and they don't want that. So that's the whole key with this question. That's the whole key. Because you're not just going to hear 3 answers. You're going to hear probably 6 or 7 possibilities. Only 3 of those will be connected
staff they want to recruit at present. Now, the other thing that you want to think about also is that word present, right? They're not going to say the word present. Just keep in mind, what are some synonyms for the word present? What are some synonyms for the word recruit? What are some synonyms for the word staff? Because they're going to use synonyms for that language to be able to point to the correct answers that they want you to choose, right? So, for this kind of question, I have the sound turned down. That's why you don't hear the person speaking, because I just want to talk to you about the question. You can, over here, you would type your answers in the box. And then when you type your answer in the box, you press the tab key, you go to number 2, press the tab key, go to number 3, right? If I want to change my answer for number 1, I can change it, but I have to type my answer in the box, right? I have to type my answer in the box. I can't make spelling mistakes, right? Because remember, at the end, they're only going to give you 2 minutes at the end to change any answers around. So you have to type things correctly the first time. That's very, very important that you understand that. Okay, so now we will shift to the next screen, and I will try to play the audio for you so you can listen. Again, remember, this is a talk. You want to be able to listen for the staff that they want to recruit. They're also going to say the staff that they don't want. So you have to be aware of that. All right, let's try it out. And there we have, my details are correct. I will continue. I will start the test. And then we will wait patiently and wait for the person to begin talking. And hopefully all goes okay, and the person will be talking very soon. So let's listen.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for giving me your time today. Firstly, I'd like to talk to you about a career in the fashion industry, then about the kind of people we're looking for at Pacific Clothing. And finally, I'd like to tell you what we offer you if you come to work for us. All kinds of people work in a wide range of jobs in the clothing industry, from drivers to office workers and artists. At the moment, we're looking to recruit new staff from several professions. Right now, we're on the lookout for scientists, particularly to work with the dyes we use to colour fabrics. And to design the patterns and choose the colours which are going to appeal to consumers, we have a strong design team. We're not looking for any new designers at present, but vacancies may arise in future. However, at the moment, we are looking for engineers to work in the production department. Just like any company, we too need practically minded people to make sure that we're not spending more than we're earning. So we're currently recruiting accountants. They're not usually associated with fashion, but let me tell you, they perform a vital task. But that's not to say that if you have qualifications in another field, such as management or sales, we won't be needing someone like you in the future.
Okay, so very, very quickly, in terms of the scientists, they said in terms of the scientists, they said that right now we're on the lookout for scientists. On the lookout for is what? Want to recruit. That's the synonym language. Also, right now is a synonym for present. So we're there, like I told you, they're playing with that language. So the answer, the first one I have there is scientist. Now, you can, if you have the S or don't have the S, they're going to mark it correct. All right, now, in terms of the next answer for engineers, again, she said, however, at the moment is a synonym for present. We are looking for a synonym for recruit, and the next answer is engineers. We're looking for engineers. And then finally, she said, so we're currently, she said this was one she said literally. So we are currently is a synonym for present. We are currently recruiting accountants. Right, currently recruiting accountants. And so the third answer is accountants. Now, some of you may have heard some other answers, and you wouldn't have chosen these other job titles as an answer choice. So for example, she said, we're not looking for any designers. So you would not choose designers because she said we're not looking for any designers, right? Also, in the last part, she said, if you have any qualifications or something in another field, such as management or sales, we may need that in the future. So they don't need that now. So you would not have chosen management or sales as one of your answer choices. So you see, now, like I told you, they gave you 6 possible choices. 3 answer choices are connected to the language recruit and present. That's what you're listening for. Answer choices connected to synonyms for recruit and present. That's how you do this type of question. That's how you manage this type of question on the computer-based test. Great. Hope you understand. Talk to you.
So we will conclude today's training, and we went through all the practice exams on how to do the listening test on computer based, along with our writing session today. Let's continue this. Actually, this is helpful for computer based, and we'll move on further for writing part 2 tomorrow. Thank you.